All right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our first panel after lunch. So I'm going to leave everybody in some vigorous exercise and to get the blood flowing and build up the excitement for our panel. I just have a few admin notes. I'm going to read off this paper because they don't trust me to remember all of these, but welcome and thank you for being here sincerely for the CIO Insights panel, Advancing IT for Intelligence Community Advantage. Some of the things I want to mention. Questions. We'll be doing questions, of course, so you have the opportunity to interact with our esteemed guests. There are question cards on the chairs, and if you need a card, we have interns that can bring you one. Just raise your hand. But we'll take those. Once you write out your questions, please write them legibly. That counts, and legible questions get read first. Wave your hand, and then somebody will come collect the card, and we'll feed it up to Mr. Cossa, the moderator. After the session, please join us in the Potomac foyer for a networking and exhibits break, and then the next plenary session will be a fireside chat with Admiral Whitworth beginning at 3 p.m. in Potomac AB. Okay, so without further ado, again, thank you for being here, and I'd like to turn the panel over to Mr. Doug Cossa, the IC CIO. Thank you.
Well, welcome. As mentioned, my name is Doug Cossa. I'm the Intelligence Community CIO. Have been in the role now, I think officially for 6 or 7 months, not too long. Coming from the Defense Intelligence Agency, where I was the CIO and Deputy CIO for a little over 7 years there. But again, thank you for joining us for this panel, which is Advancing IT for the Intelligence Community. Have with me several of my colleagues, both CIOs and CISOs, or former CISOs as well. Really just wanted to start with an introduction of our priorities and also our panelists who are here, a couple voluntarily as well, which I truly appreciate. But like I say, I'm new in my role, and many of them are new in their roles as well. And so we were going to start really just with an introduction of ourselves and where our priorities are within our respective organizations. As I've come into this role as the Intelligence Community CIO, I've really broken it down into 3 areas. One is acquisition oversight. That is a unique responsibility that I have as the IC CIO for the oversight of acquisition of technology for the intelligence community. That includes 2 parts. One is how we do things in common, which we refer to as services of common concern. So think like identity management, desktop environments, and everything in between. Those common functions that we have, we've identified as services of common concern, which either OD&I can lead or, more typically, one of the elements of the intelligence community. The other is enterprise licensing. So again, in the spirit of doing things efficiently and in integration of using common vehicles for contracting to acquire tools, whether that is software, hardware, or anything else that we manage within our enterprise environment. The other big priority that I have, of course, is on cybersecurity. And what many of you may not realize is we run the Security Coordination Center within the OD&I, specifically within ICCIO. This SCC has typically been focusing on information sharing of cyber vulnerabilities, cyber threats, and also mitigations. We are elevating the role within the IC to be more of an oversight in terms of our cyber hygiene, to include cybersecurity inspections, something that I've brought with me from DIA that we stood up as part of JWICS. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit more about it when we get to our panelists, but as part of OD&I, we've integrated the functions of technology to where OD&I CIO is now integrated with IC CIO. So that's been a big change for us. And more kind of getting back to an operational mindset like I had at DIA, which Ben Phelps is the acting CIO of. So we'll talk more about that. But figure we'll just start with you, Ben, just an intro. And I really also wanted to talk about what kind of jobs you've had in the past, your history, and what led you to be in the role as Treasury Intel CIO now. I think a lot of folks are interested in that career path or how to actually avoid it, getting into a CIO or CISO role. So we'll start with you.
Sure, thanks, Doug. It's an honor to be here. As Doug mentioned, I'm Ben Davis. I'm the CIO for Treasury's Office of Intelligence and Analysis, so the Intel component within the Department of Treasury. My AOR is the top secret fabric. That's the easiest way to think about it. I've been in the job a little over a year. I think May of last year is when I started, so still relatively new, but not new enough to claim it outside of this forum. Priorities, I would say, prior experience, Doug just mentioned it, but I was the director of the Security Coordination Center out under CIO prior to coming to Treasury, was there for about a year and a half. Before that, I was in the Pentagon within OUSDI&S leading cybersecurity efforts for what was then the ISR Enterprise Capabilities Office. Prior to that, a little time on the Hill, and then the vast majority of my career before that was in DIA CIO, where I actually had the pleasure of working for Doug for a few years before I transitioned onto those other roles. As I mentioned, came in the role about a little over a year ago. The 5 priorities we've identified since coming on board are: 1, what I'm calling TFIN modernization. So TFIN is the Treasury Foreign Intelligence Network. That is that top secret fabric within the department. That's really focused on the operational readiness, making sure as the JWIC's WAN modernizes, we're modernizing our local infrastructure in line with that. So think of it as redundancy, resiliency, IT operations management, ITSM, those type things. The second priority is cybersecurity. Doug mentioned the cybersecurity inspection program that he implemented at DIA. We've had the pleasure of undergoing an inspection, which really helped us narrow in on where we needed to focus from a cybersecurity perspective. So that's taking up a lot of the time over the last year, just making sure that from a traditional risk management perspective, we can streamline how we do RMF, that we have the right continuous monitoring in place, and that we can detect and respond to potential malicious cyber activity on our network. The third priority is partnerships. So from an IT perspective, we've really been trying to build our relationships with our mission partners inside the department, really sow the seams across our IC partners, because they are force multipliers for us. And then really do things like this and really reach out and build relationships with our industry partners, because we are full steam ahead on adoption of COTS products, and really want to make sure that we're building that relationship with you all. And then also from a partnership perspective, enabling second and third party partners with our international partners that the department engages with, as well as the financial services sector, making sure we can share classified information with the financial services sector. Fourth is all things data and AI, and then fifth is really the IT workforce. So those are the 5 priorities that we have within OIA.
Oh, thank you. Kathryn?
Yeah, good afternoon. It's great to be here, so thank you for having me. It's always great for me to be participating on a broader IT conversation as a CISO. So I am the Intelligence Community Chief Information Security Officer. And in my role, believe it or not, one of my biggest things is to realize efficiencies, which may be surprising. It's really important to me to look at how are we doing authorizations? How are we doing ATOs? So how do we approve things? How do we make it easier for our partners and our commercial software vendors and everyone that we're working with to be more easily incorporated into our environment securely? So that's certainly a big focus for me. Doug mentioned the JSIP program. So what we're basically doing is trying to broaden what we're doing for cybersecurity effectiveness and oversight. So looking at inspections across all of our networks and how are we doing. So it's one thing to set things up initially. What we can do better at is to look at, well, how are we doing? Are we maturing? Are we evolving? Are we using state of the art? Brings me to 2 more points. You'll hear a theme from me. Zero trust, which I'm sure is not a surprise to everyone. Zero trust is about integration, and it's about doing things securely in a more integrated fashion. So how do we get our security operations to see things better? How do we bring together identity, data, and networks in new ways to be able to have context and more easily look at the adversaries? And then finally, of course, artificial intelligence is something that we're seeing and using every day now in cybersecurity, trying to use it to improve how we look for adversaries. We're also looking at more sophisticated attacks coming our way that are starting to leverage some of the artificial intelligence vectors. So with that, I'll hand it over.
Thanks. And Ben?
Okay. First, thank you, Doug, and I'd like to thank AFCEA. It's such a wonderful organization to be able to partner with industry and government and move forward. I'd also like to thank the audience. I see a couple of familiar faces, and so thank you all for being here. I'm a proud Marylander. I was raised about 20 miles northeast from here, retired naval aviator, and recovering CISO. So just so you know, I am acting ODNI CIO. I've been with ODNI for about 12 years now. I was for about 5 years between the IC CIO and the internal ODNI CIO. I was the deputy IC CISO and then the ODNI CISO for a while before I took over the acting role last February timeframe. With respect to kind of the priorities that I'm looking at, it's going to be very similar to what you hear from Doug. We are going to be nested with respect to our strategic alignment with ICCIO. So you'll hear a lot of the familiar type things. One of the things we're looking at is the fastest growing area that you'll see in IT, and I'm sure you probably hear it all over the conferences you go to, and that's making sure that we grow our AI and our data management. As we look forward, those two things go together. We got to make sure that we have the appropriate data management in order to do the AI and the efficiencies that we need as we bring AI into our organizations. But we also need to make sure that we do AI responsibly and with the governance that is needed so that it's done correctly and with respect to ethics. We're also going to be taking a look at efficiencies and refining our information and communication technology investments. We can't afford to do shadow IT anymore. We can't afford to have someone in a back corner doing IT, purchasing their own thing, doing it by themselves. We got to make sure we take a holistic look at it. So where two people are doing the same thing, you've got to bring them together to make sure the investments pay off in a wholesale type manner. We're going to be also evolving our enterprise offerings. You'll hear about SOCs from Doug. Well, internally, we also have, just like every agency does, our enterprise offerings for the entirety of what the agency does. Whether it's a platform so people can develop on, a DevSecOps platform, or any other type of platforms to make type of delivery for mission, or maybe it's our monitoring services so that people don't have to do things themselves when they're building out their systems and we can monitor them appropriately at the enterprise level. Finally, it's advancing cybersecurity capabilities. And with that, it's a wholesale advancement. It's not just your enterprise monitoring, it's not the advancements we need to make with RMF, but it's also taking a look at what is your red team and blue team doing? We really need to make sure we leverage these things in order to be able to find what you normally wouldn't find out of an authorization in a security control test, but what are those vulnerabilities at wholesale across the department? It might not be in the system itself, it might be in the way that system communicates with your enterprise monitoring. And so those are the things that we definitely have to look at, and those are my priorities as I look forward. Marty.
Well, I'm Marty Nachman, FBI CIO. Thank you for having me, and thank you to Doug for asking me to join on this panel. So I'm coming to this job with a little bit of a different perspective because I'm an agent, and my background is far more operational than IT, but nonetheless have spent most of my career, both in the Bureau and prior to this in DoD, looking at how do we use data and technology to drive mission. And that's the approach I come to this position with in the FBI. And the three main things I want to touch on, shocking, it's not unique to the FBI, you've heard it all already. But number one for us and from our leadership is how do we use AI? How do we adopt? How do we implement? How do we leverage some of those capabilities that we're hearing about in the private sector, we're hearing about from our partners across government, and apply that to our unique mission space, mindful of all the governance, of all the legal responsibilities we have in the Department of Justice as well when it comes to the application of a technology like that and the recognition that we have to get our data right if we want to use something like AI. The second thing is cybersecurity. Every day there are those looking to do harm to the Bureau, to our data, to aggravate our ability to execute on our mission. And so really focused on being thoughtful on how we are doing that in conjunction with our partners, recognizing we can't do it alone on the different fabrics that we manage in the FBI, because we do have unclassified, secret, top secret, and other networks that we're responsible for and that we have to provide coverage on across the board. And then the last thing is on streamlining some of these IT governance processes, as Kathryn alluded to, which is how do we get to ATO faster? How do we do it more efficiently? If another agency has issued an ATO, how do we better leverage that ATO? How do we ultimately get someone who is an investigator who has learned about a technology, or someone at our headquarters that has identified a process that could be streamlined, to come to the right folks in the Bureau, which is in the Office of the Chief Information Officer, and say, I want to use this new technology. I want to adopt this for my use case. How do we get them to yes quicker? And those are kind of the three high-level things I want to touch on right now.
No, that's great. Thank you. So as you heard, each of them as CIOs or CISOs offer a different kind of service to those that they support, whether that's within their agency or within the community. Marty mentioned kind of a demand from those that he supports of accelerating the whole authorization process and putting efficiencies in place to make that faster, right, to meet the demands that those that we support have. Question that I'll ask the panel here are, what are some of those other customer demands that you're receiving where you're getting pressure to go faster or change? Certainly we've had a lot of change, as Marty mentions, in ATOs. We've had a lot of pressure to adopt things quicker, whether that means moving things into cloud services and making them more robust in the back end, or making our networks more secure or interoperable, our desktops included in that. We have a lot of different pressures in our roles. I will say, in my role as ICCIO, the pressure comes down into three areas of architecture that we're actually required to do by statute. We have an enterprise architect, and that falls under ICCIO. The areas we're focusing in, because we could architect a lot, is human capital management, so actually getting to a shared environment within the IC, or at least an interoperable environment, and getting out of the stovepipes of how we perform that function. Similarly, financial and acquisition systems, of creating efficiencies there. And then the third is, of course, zero trust, which Kathryn is helping lead as the IC CISO. But with the merger of OD&I CIO and ICCIO, we're actually using OD&I as the test bed for deploying a lot of these capabilities. So that has actually been a very valuable partnership that Ben, Kathryn, and I have created with the merger of our organizations. But Kathryn, I'll start with you as a CISO on that note in terms of zero trust and cyber and making things more efficient. What are some of the pressures you're getting at the IC level?
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Let me start by talking about my background, because that will play into one of my stories here. So I grew up in security operations. I was an incident responder and came up through the ranks doing that, operations manager and then director. Most of my career I've spent in the national lab organizations as well as nonprofits such as MITRE. So my background comes from doing it and being a practitioner and being a technologist. So I got a little story. So what I'm going to say is the answer to the question, which is user experience is one of the biggest demands and pressures that we have in cybersecurity. And my story is about firewalls. So I used to do firewalls for a living, and they'd usually put us in a closet somewhere to configure the firewall. So I came out of the closet where we were configuring the firewall. And this 3 users were coming my direction, like, there you are, there's your firewall person. And I was like, what? They're like, the lights dimmed and the network latency just went through the roof. And I had to show them that the firewall had not yet been plugged in. So that just kind of exemplifies the world of cybersecurity, is that no matter what it is, whether you've done anything or not, I'm the problem, right? So user experience is huge. I would say there's a lot of pressure on things like multi-factor authentication and things like that users don't want to spend too much time doing. So things like single sign-on and things that make their lives more challenging, but yet really provide another level of security, are where we tend to struggle the most. For zero trust in particular, what we're focusing on is how do we make the user experience and identity part of that okay, while still being able to confirm and validate that they are actually who they say they are, and they continue to be needing the access they need. So user experience has been my biggest challenge throughout my career, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ben, I'll actually open it up to you as well to talk about, we've had a lot of change and a lot of pressure within OD&I. You want to talk to some of those areas?
So the biggest thing is what I like to call the flash to bang. And for those in DoD, you've probably heard that before. It's the time it takes for a need or an idea or something like that to when it becomes usable. We cannot afford the 12 to 18 months it used to take in order for, oh, I have an idea, let's figure out the technology for it, let's get it acquisitioned, let's get it authorized, and then by the time you get it usable, the technology is either already passed and it's old, or the original need has kind of passed. We have absolutely got to shorten that. One of the things that we're concentrating and partnering with Kathryn on is the RMF, or the authorization part of that. We've got to get out of the area of compliance. RMF is not about complying with security controls. It's about understanding, knowing the risk, and accepting the risk where risk is acceptable. In order to do that, you truly have to understand what is acceptable, what is not. What is the true state of the system? What is it using versus what is it not using? And it doesn't take months to do that. You have to also, as an agency, allow for these enterprise services to pick up where systems can't deliver for themselves. It's the log monitoring, it's the kind of the boring stuff of what it's doing, but it's absolutely necessary so the mission deliverers and the mission IT people can deliver the systems for what they care about, and all the boring stuff is left for the enterprise services to pick up and go forward from there. And with that partnership, you can move forward and get things going faster. The other part of it is the acquisitions, is making sure you're leveraging those enterprise licensing, making sure you're leveraging those task orders, those things you can do. We have this wonderful multi-cloud contract. It's the ability to be able to leverage that multi-cloud, let me say that 5 times real fast, multi-cloud contract, move forward at a faster rate, inherit controls, and then in order to be able to get to that bang faster delivery for mission, faster delivery for the customer, and meet those needs that need to happen. And that is what we're really kind of seeing pressure for. And what I want you to get out of this is, it's not ignoring RMF. It's really fully embracing RMF for what it's supposed to be, and it's an understanding of the risk.
Yeah, and I could riff off that if I might. Really, it's about taking these controls that exist and mapping them to real-world kinds of threats that are out there. So we know what kinds of attacks we've seen over the years. We've seen phishing, we've seen web traversals, we've seen SQL injections. How do those things map from the CVEs and everything else over to the controls? And then we prioritize the 853 controls. I'm using controls like that's known by everybody, but the NIST RMF framework with the 853 controls, there's a lot of them. So if you do all, 900 of them, do you really have a secure system? Maybe, but that's a lot of effort. So maybe we focus on those controls that really speak to the real world attacks that are happening first. And then over time, maybe we can look at some of the other things. So that's kind of how we've been implementing real world with the RMF.
Yeah, thank you. Ben and Marty, I'll ask both of you the question. So a little different, where I spoke about the role that Kathryn and I have in terms of architecture and oversight and the standards and assessing the IC's ability to meet those standards and change and where we need to go. Your role is a little different, right, as an IC element. Can you talk about what your primary role as a CIO is within Treasury Intel?
Sure. As I mentioned earlier, my AOR is the top secret fabric, but as coming from the Intel component, I'm the TSSCI service provider for the whole department. So when you look at the department's national security mission, my sister organizations from OFAC, FinCEN, International Affairs, the secretary, all of them are consumers of the services we offer. So we are responsible for delivering the capabilities that they need to connect to the forums in which they need to connect to, exchange data with whoever they need to exchange data with. So we are, think of us as the TSSCI service provider for the department. On the unclassed and secret sides, we are consumers from a different part of the department.
And Marty?
And then for the FBI, my role I see as much more of a strategic thinking, not as involved in what's up, what's down, right, on the technology side thinking, rather than asking what we need to do to answer a question or meet a requirement, how are we doing that, and how can we be thinking differently? How do we drive innovation in the FBI when it comes to technology in particular? And then another big focus right now across government is how do we identify those efficiencies, streamlining our investments, looking for opportunities to leverage tools from other government agencies from the IC, some of these services of common concern, how we better integrate those through our workflows, in particular on the TS fabric. Those will be the two big things I can highlight on that.
We've talked about a lot of change, and we've seen a lot of change over the course of, obviously, our careers, but particularly the last 6 to 12 months even, too, in terms of IT. One of the biggest changes I've seen in my career, and actually one of my old bosses is in the audience from 22 years ago, where I used to be a database administrator and a network administrator, and there's no such thing as RMF, or you just had your server and you put stuff on it and you ran and that was it. It was a pretty easy world. That obviously is very different today for multiple reasons in terms of where we're going with zero trust and cloud and everything in between. What are some of the big changes you've seen over the past 6 to 12 months, year, as you've entered into your roles? And Ben, we'll just start with you.
Definitely, and you've kind of heard me say it, it's the demand for AI, and they want it now. But really what we have to do is, you heard me say earlier, is make sure we do it responsibly. And looking at how we're doing it across OD&I, we're making sure that we're leveraging what our industry partners, the work they've put into it, and taking that and putting it inside the agency, but making sure we do it in a responsible way. That is, yeah, what we're looking at for OD&I. So.
Yeah. Kathryn, I know cybersecurity's changed a lot.
Yeah, it's changing every minute. So certainly the AI, so I can riff off that as well. So I'm using AI in my job now. That's changed from probably 2 months ago, I'd say. I started doing it, and then I started realizing, oh my gosh, this is such a powerful tool. You can feed stuff in and get stuff out, and I don't have to think as much. That's a dangerous thing for all of us, right? We need to keep our critical thinking and how we work alive. But artificial intelligence for us is here. It is here in using it for what I do. It's here for my teams. My teams are using it for looking at what kind of attack is this? Have we seen this before? What kinds of trends can you get from it? So security operations teams are beginning to use AI in new ways. We're also seeing it in some of the attacks. Some of the attacks, if you've seen phishing, I mean, we get these at home. Very sophisticated, no errors. They know what to go for. I mean, I'm just reading in the news that we're looking at AI engines that are looking at social media and other things. So these attacks are increasing as we speak. They're getting more sophisticated. So on the defense side of things, we need to do the same. So we're looking at how can we affect more dynamic defenses? How can we change what we're doing every day?
Yep. Marty?
Yeah, for me in the Bureau, a big change I think has been in the way we look at technology and these data solutions and ensuring that we're responsive to our end users and our customers and trying to think about, the Bureau has 50 some odd field offices. How do we ensure that we're answering to those clients when it comes to development of our technology, of our solutions, and trying to bridge that gap between field and headquarters, because what we don't need, especially right now, are 55, 56 duplicative solutions that are in existence on top of the 18 solutions in the IC, on top of the 40-odd components in the Department of Justice, right? So, one of the things we're looking at is how do we better understand just what's out there, and we're integrating it and trying to build that knowledge space so then when it does come to identifying what is the right enterprise capability, it's done so in a thoughtful, requirement-driven way.
Yeah. And then Ben?
Yeah, so I'll echo the AI sentiment. So I mean, as a small organization, it's really been a force multiplier for us being able to leverage it for simple tasks and getting some of that capacity back. Another not necessarily new, but new for us is the IC's cloud journey. So we from C2S to C2E, we Treasury didn't participate in C2S, but we migrated our first workloads to C2E this year. So we've reaped a lot of benefits from that already on our mission data side, and we're really aggressively pursuing leveraging our cloud capabilities on our enterprise IT side as well.
All right.
Doug, if you don't mind, I have kind of a go back. Sorry, I blanked on that one for a little bit, but I think one of the biggest changes I've also seen as I've been acting CIO is the difference of what the CIOs used to be kind of the technology innovator. We're now following Doug's lead, and if you've heard him talk before, he'll talk about, hey, we're becoming a technology organization. We're now, instead of an innovator, we're also becoming an enabler. And technology is happening where it is, either in mission or in business, and they're calling for these certain technologies because they're becoming wise on them. They're becoming better in order to be able to apply the technologies they see, whether it's at conferences like this or in other commercials or things they hear, and wanting that for where they are. So as an enabler, it's our responsibility to make sure it's done in an enterprise fashion, that it's done in a fashion that does truly meet the requirements where they are. And that's one of the biggest changes I've seen since I've been part of a CIO, is from an innovator to also an enabler.
And I would just add on that, you've heard it mentioned before, but this idea of we can't just be seen as the compliance shops. Yep. That's one big thing that we've tried to change in the FBI is how does OCIO go from the compliance checklist to we're here to enable you to do what you want to do in the FBI. We're here to drive mission. And so I think that we're seeing that because, frankly, budgets aren't getting bigger, personnel staffs aren't getting bigger, and we have to think how to do better with our customer base and drive these efficiencies where we can identify them.
Yeah.
Good. We have a few questions here for the audience, so I'm going to start with one of those. This one is interesting. We've touched on it a little bit, and maybe Kathryn, this is something you can speak to or start with, perhaps. But it deals with authorizations, to include SCREM. But how does one IC agency that's using a product and another less inclined to assess that product, or perhaps they're inconsistent assessments across the community, how can those decisions better come in line? This is a trick question, because you know the answer to this one.
Yes. So I'm gonna try to get the essence of the question, which sounds like how do we realize efficiencies maybe
in authorizations,
exactly. Across disparate or different kinds of organizations and
that's
missions. Right. So yeah, actually that's something we're tackling. So we call it reciprocity. We're working toward that. So basically what we're trying to queue up is the sharing of what we call bodies of evidence. So how can we share security plans and assessments and pen tests, red teaming, all those things that we do in order to authorize a particular system. We're making more effort within the intelligence community to share that across. There's no reason why, I don't know, NSA can't see what NGA's done for their environment. Noting that among CISOs, missions differ, risks differ, and the risk appetite of one organization isn't always the same as another. And that also varies from system to system, and that's why CISOs are still going to be needed in the future, I think, So, less is more when it comes to realizing efficiencies. We do want to be able to not create more work for people, but at the same time, we do want to keep things secure. So what we've been doing is we will hand over all these artifacts to a CISO, and then they can decide from themselves and just do a diff between what they've already approved and what they think needs to happen for security. So.
Yeah, I'll add the other area that we are expanding in the community, and this relates back to the architecture that I discussed, is DevSecOps. And so we all have the function within the IC, and this is with DOW as well. We all use many of the same tools. What we're looking is an architecture that applies the same controls as well. So if we bring things through a similar front door in the same way, we can have increased reciprocity by using those same standards, which is not necessarily what happens today uniformly across our communities. I'll add with what Kathryn said with the authorizations, that sharing of the bodies of evidence is a big thing. That is a very low-hanging fruit, a simple step that we haven't necessarily done efficiently as a community, and that just requires exposing what those BOEs are, or even knowing what's there, what tools have already been authorized in the community, and being able to work with that agency, just identifying it as the first step. We had not had that in the past, and that is something that Kathryn and I did recently established within the past few months, is an IC-wide authorization repository. Much like a data catalog of how we've managed our data in the IC, that tells you where it is, when it was done, how it was done, what standards were used. We've done the same thing in terms of our authorization. So I think that is definitely an easy step in the right direction to get there. We have a lot more work to do. I will say the value that you could provide as industry, for those of you in the audience, is to use the enterprise services when you're working with different agencies. That's not necessarily done today. What we still have, Ben mentioned this as well, and one of our priorities is what we refer to as shadow IT. And some of this has just been over the decades. It's old. It was done for a particular function, for a particular office. It might have custom identity management, custom cross-domain. What we need from industry is to help adopt the enterprise services that the agencies provide, or that the IC as a whole provides. That gets reciprocity as well, because those capabilities have already been assessed. If you adopt those, it makes the authorization process so much faster. Going out of the box is also faster as well for their authorizations. We still see a lot of customization, or the urge to customize, even trying to customize off-the-shelf tools. This is a big cultural change that we are really trying to push within the IC right now, is to adopt first, or go out of the box first, or adopt what already exists in the community, and if absolutely necessary, build. But I think in this day and age, that is really the exception, not the norm. So those are some of the areas that we're pushing. This is much more of a cultural change than I would say a technical change, of really working with industry to adopt the services that we already have in place. Go to another question here. And Ben, maybe this is for you. You mentioned AI. I think you mentioned AI.
We all did.
Yeah. So do you see an increase in preventative AI-focused cyber solutions going forward? Maybe putting your old CISO hat on as well.
Preventative what? I'm sorry.
Preventative AI-focused cyber solutions.
Can I phone a friend on that one?
Yeah, I'll answer.
You can phone a friend.
We did speak about inspections, both Kathryn and I did.
Yeah.
That's interesting, because it gets to the, are you creating your own denial of service by using AI in a way where your adversary uses it to play against you, right? And that might be where that question was kind of trying to head.
Could be.
So go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the things when I was the internal CISO I was looking at is like different level of what I would call pen tests. And you heard me talk about it earlier with respect to that's one of the focuses where we kind of want to get to. I see kind of an early stage, looking at depending upon the risk of a system. You could have some type of AI / generic type pen test just to make sure, and I'm not talking just like probing ports or anything like that. It's taking the TTPs of adversaries and things like that and apply them against your systems that are known TTPs. And depending upon the risk of the system or the data that it holds as it moves up, you start bringing in more of your assets and the people that will look at these things and start trying to probe the system a little bit more or look at that for a little bit more hardy pen test. Again, based on the risk level, but this is kind of where I see like possible like the AI thing playing in. In the end, I still think that you're going to need people pen testers. Is that a thing? In order to be able to kind of fully put a system through its paces. But
or AI pen testers. Ooh, you could do that.
You could.
You could do that. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So we had the same argument when intrusion prevention systems came out. I don't know if those who are around for that, where there was this whole philosophy: if you put something in line, are you creating a denial of service if if an adversary figures it out and puts a block against you, right? So this, in my mind, is similar for where we are now. with artificial intelligence. I think it'll get more sophisticated as time goes on. So I think there have to be guardrails around. So yes, preventative, with an asterisk with it, okay, we'll do some preventative, but we'll have a human in the loop trying to make sure that it's not doing anything crazy. I mean, we're still dealing with hallucinations and weird things happening in AI, so really you need your experts there who are looking at it. And some of our more advanced experts need to be looking at preventative things as we go along.
Yeah, I think, one of the clear utilities of AI also, getting back to cybersecurity and how we do the inspections and scoping them, is really finding the endpoints. Like I say, networks have been in place for a long time, and Ben, you can speak to this as well. Sometimes there's stuff there that we don't even know is there, that's in the inventory. And really identifying those endpoints and scoping the inspections in the context of the threats would be very, very useful, and something that we are starting to adopt. Let's take a look at another one of these questions here. A lot on AI. Multi-cloud. So how do we think the IC's move to multi-cloud is going? Do you see mission partners leveraging more than one cloud vendor? And if not, what are the barriers that exist for true adoption? And what is working? I will say, looking across, there has been a significant shift, even in the past 12 months, to all the cloud service providers as opposed to just centralized on one or two. That is definitely changing in a good direction. Interoperability is going to be key. So I think what's limited us in the past is the services that have been authorized, particularly on the high side. We've been expanding those authorizations, like I say, over the past year, so that has helped us bring in new cloud service providers and new services by those cloud service providers. I think one of the biggest shifts we're moving towards is on the business systems in terms of the migration to the cloud. As I mentioned, human capital management, financial management, those have all been traditionally unique agency-developed applications. And I would venture to say every agency in the IC now is looking to adopt cloud-enabled technologies out of the box to modernize those business functions. That's probably the biggest area of growth that I see right now across the IC. Ben or Marty, did you want to talk about your cloud journey, where you're on, what you see?
Yeah, like I mentioned, we're pretty early in ours, but from the point of view of the question, that's actually a good thing because we are actually in a position to really start fresh and look at which workloads belong in which CSP and make our decisions from that point. So, we are fully on board with a multi-cloud strategy, and we really want to move out on it.
Yeah. The other thing I'll add in terms of the inhibitors of cloud have been the overseas presence. Obviously, the IC, its primary mission is OCONUS. That's where our work takes place. The functions need to be close to the workloads and the data. And so that environment is maturing. So in the near term, as we look at network resilience and access to the data, how we operate at the edge, disconnected environments, cloud capabilities are certainly maturing in those areas, but still there exists the need for our own on-prem solutions for particular functions and missions. Anything else you wanted to add, Marty? Okay. Let's see, another one. So how flexible are you in trying to get new technology into current programs, which relates to one of the first questions that we received, which is, what is the best way for companies to demo its software capabilities? Are there any avenues for doing that? I will say within OD&I in particular, we are using more non-traditional methods to pilot softwares, as opposed to going more of the bigger acquisition routes. We have been setting up sandbox environments on the low side, looking at those capabilities to understand how it would integrate into our environment, not just on the low, but onto the high side. Really looking, more recent ones, we've done 30 to 90-day pilots. That has certainly been an increase in how we've assessed capabilities. Of course, also conferences like this are very helpful for looking at what's out there. In fact, at DIA, for a number of the things with that we've done within our programs, we adopted those from vendor demos at conferences just like this. So that's been a great way to expose capabilities that we can integrate into our environment as well. Ben, any thoughts from you as well?
One of the things that I like doing is looking left and right, whether that's left inside the IC, right, the other federal partners or DoD partners, or even out into industry landscape of what has worked for them, what are those technologies as we move forward, and what is the proven ones that are really good to do. The other part of that is making sure that any of the technologies we pursue have true requirements inside the agency. One of the things I'm not fond of is picking technologies then searching for a requirement to implement it to. The other way around, it ends up working much better because you have a customer and a need that you're fulfilling versus going out and searching for someone to pay for something. So I think those are the key things for making sure the technology that we bring in are successful.
This is an interesting question about zero trust. So we all recognize that procurement needs to evolve. Oh, wait, sorry, wrong question. It was, where is it? Okay. What do I do with it? We talked about, can't find it, but I'll summarize it. We talked about the context of AI helping with security, but what about the security of AI? What are we looking at for that? I will say part of that calculus needs to be on the governance of data as it relates to AI, of course. There are technology issues, certainly, but when it comes to the intelligence community's use of AI, the vast majority of the risk we have, at least on the analytics side, is being able to share that homework, not treating things as a black box. That's where analytic tradecraft needs to evolve, but at the same time, it's the same analytic standards that we apply today. Some of the biggest engineering challenges, accidents, things that have happened over time, whether that's in the federal government or whether that's in industry, have been when we don't understand the inputs and outputs of a function that we are performing. And that is the biggest risk for AI as I see it, especially as it relates to the intelligence community. Even in an example, I have two cars. One is old that I commute in, and one is newer and has backup cameras and everything else. I've been driving my newer car recently and reversing out of my driveway. I don't really need to look. I can just, it's off alarms and I can just pull out. Well, that doesn't work in my old car that doesn't have a camera in any of those alarms, so I find myself just pulling out in the traffic and not even looking. That's where the danger of AI is. I mean, some of the biggest innovations have also come from trying to solve the problem, the journey of getting there. That's very true for intelligence as well. As we dissect the data that we have, the collection that we've received, while we've made advances of not everything necessarily has to fall on the cutting room floor, we have the ability to organize data now that we didn't have in the past. We discover things along the journey of breaking down that data and coming up and creating that intelligence. That, I think, is actually the biggest risk of AI. I don't necessarily think it's from a technology perspective. It comes from the anticipation and the wanting to automate our thinking as opposed to forcing more calculated thinking as we break down problems. Big risk for the IC, and that comes from more governance and tradecraft oversight in my mind. But welcome your thoughts as well, any of you, particularly Kathryn, from a cybersecurity perspective.
Sure, so securing AI is certainly where we're focusing right now. Those examples that I've suggested so far about cybersecurity and doing trend analysis, all contained in a very highly secured environment, right? Because we don't know. The inputs and outputs that traditionally in engineering has been how we do things. And AI is a game changer when it comes to what comes out of that thing. Well, we know what's going in, mostly. We don't necessarily know what's going to come out. Over time, that can shift. And so where we're struggling is, what is that data now? You talk about data tagging and classification and all those things. you have this stuff going in where you've confirmed what it is, especially in the IC. We're pretty good about knowing what data we have, but we're not so great at this new way of when it comes out, what does that look like? And that's where we're focusing, frankly. You know, where are the guardrails around that? And what does the RMF look like for AI? There's a NIST RMF out there for AI, for example. I think these are nascent, early versions of what AI is eventually going to be for how do we do security around that.
And kind of riff off of that and Doug's story a little bit about backing out of his driveway. Teaching a teenage driver how to drive right now, so yeah. One of the recent articles I read was about how college professors are catching kids by using AI from writing their own paper. And this is as much as a machine problem as it is a human problem. And one of our questions that we had and prepared for was, you know, what is your recommendations for industry? And one of my biggest recommendations is bring in people and teach people how to think. And in this, it's just check the output. I can't tell you when I was CISO how many people we got that were trained, trained in continuous monitoring. Well, really what they were doing is they were trained in a tool, but not the ability to check the output of that tool and apply the thought process of, does this make sense? And that is the biggest thing that worries me with respect to AI is the ability for the human to still be able to think, check the output that's there, and does it apply to the question or the prompt that I gave it, and does it apply to the situation? Can I still back out of my driveway?
Yep. We've talked a little bit already about opportunities for industry to share their capabilities. What are the venues for procurement we're thinking about to do things more non-traditionally? So question for all of you, where can industry or other federal partners help the most, both in terms of capabilities and skills, given all the priorities we talked about? So Ben, we'll just go down the line, start with you.
Sure. I mean, I think obviously the skill sets in advanced and emerging technologies, AI, ML, stuff like that. Another area is just helping me maximize the capabilities I already have. I'm not so sure that we fully reap the benefits of what we're already buying. So like be an honest broker, help me understand where like we could do what the realm of possible is with what we're already consuming, and then just continue to be a force multiplier. Like you know the world technology better than I do, and I want to make sure that we're staying engaged with you. So let's not let the conversation stop here. Like I definitely want to make sure we're continuing to engage. I didn't highlight it during the specific question, Doug, but it came to me afterwards. But one of the things we're trying to do is, OIA has recently been given the authority to use other transactional authority. So we're still working through the final stages of, operationalizing that and making sure we can actually, get it across the finish line. But once we do, we're definitely inside of the IT organization looking forward to being able to leverage it, prototype and make sure we can rapidly get, capability inside the department.
Yep. Which is what OD&I is doing as well. Kathryn?
Yeah, so the skill set of those coming out of school and generations, I'll just riff off what Ben had mentioned earlier. The skill sets I'm very concerned about. There's a lot of reliance on technology now. I mean, my kids can't read maps, so I'm teaching them how to read an old-fashioned map, because when the satellite isn't available, they're lost. So they still need to know how to think and how to do for themselves. I worry about the depth and the skill sets of cybersecurity moving forward, not just knowing a little bit about a lot of different things, generalists, but really, no, I know everything there is to know about TCP/IP, for example. How can we teach them and keep them moving? The other thing we can use from industry is I get a lot of vendors and people reaching out need to understand the problem that you're trying to solve, or you can solve, or you have solved, and also how does it integrate with what I already have? We have like threat platforms, we have SIM tools, we have SOAR tools, we have all these different things, and we're not so great at being able to integrate them across what we're doing. Zero Trust is about that. So I'm hoping that we can have a lot more integration across vendor platforms moving forward. That's my dream.
Okay. Just a quick, before I answer this question, because I'm going to make sure that I cover all my points on my card in front of me. How many people are from industry? Raise your hand. Great, write this down. 4 things. Integrate across your contract boundaries, and I'll get into that in a second. Customer-centric product development, shifting your security left, and cultivating independent thinkers, which you heard me say earlier. When I talk about integrating across contract boundaries, I'm talking when you're going out into an agency, there's going to be some other contracts there. You might be in direct competition, but ultimately you've got to integrate together in order to produce for the mission. Sometimes it might not be the best for your bottom line. I'm asking you, please integrate across contract lines. We will recognize that so that we can better our agency mission and get what needs to be moved forward. This includes in the technology, this includes in your people and your FTE and the way they work. It is absolutely important that this integration happens. The customer-centric product development. Understand the customer. In this case, I'm talking about the government. Understand where we're going. If you have questions, ask where we're going. And then look at your products. Does it apply? Should I start integrating with a different type of product because maybe I see my customer heading that way? There's a lot of people out there that understand the different technologies that we're moving to. And if you don't start creating those integrations, you don't start understanding the customers, then you're kind of putting us in a pickle where the government then has to look at how to do that and on our back, and we might start looking elsewhere. So that's really where I'm talking about customer-centric product development. Shifting security left. You heard me talk about the flash to bang. You heard Kathryn talk about trying to speed up RMF, trying to do that. You all can help that coming out of industry. Understand the security controls that your product delivers. Understand if we take it off the shelf and we implement it in our environment, what are those controls that we already have? Document those, give them to us, make it easier. Allow us to hit the easy button to say, I brought this in, this is already documented, this is already verified, therefore it is faster for me to go from point A to point B to make this thing more usable. Shift it to the left, map your controls, map the inheritance. And then finally, you heard me say cultivate independent thinkers. As the integrators and stuff, they come into agencies, there are limits that are placed on them. There's some decisions that are inherently governmental, but thinking is not. Cultivate those independent thinkers. Allow them to see the things and make the recommendations that further the mission and further the government and enable this partnership, this relationship that we have between government and industry.
Okay. Marty, well, final question for you. Where can industry or other partners help the most, both in terms of capabilities and skill?
Yep. So the biggest thing I would say is there's a lot of folks, a lot of components in the IC using similar tools or similar capabilities, similar use cases, and we don't always talk to each other very well on recognizing that, but you all might have that visibility, and being able to highlight that to us has been, in my time in this role, really valuable, recognizing that one component, whether it's in the Department of Justice or it's in the IC, is using this use case or using this product in this way that I might not otherwise know about. So being on the lookout and being able to highlight that for us, I think, is invaluable. And then on the partnership side with our other governmental partners who are in the room, one of the biggest kind of takeaways for me through those relationships and partnerships has been, lessons learned. How have you used these solutions in your specific use case? Because we might have the same solution, but I might realize, in the FBI, I could use it this way, and I didn't think about that. And so sharing some of those lessons, I think, is really key as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, with that, I think we're about out of time. Thank you to our panelists, and thank you to all who have joined us today. We'll be around for any questions.
Thank you all very much for attending. Mr. Cossa, thank you. Our panelists, thank you very much. That was an insightful and very valuable conversation. If many of the questions focused on AI, if you want to hear more about AI, I can guarantee you that Admiral Whitworth, when he speaks at 3 o'clock in the main ballroom, he'll be speaking about AI, Project Maven, and many other interesting topics and relevant topics. So thank you all again. Please join me in one final round of applause for our panel.
Thank you.